Hi, Lester, Wushu Engineer. Excuse the shorts. It's Queensland summer starting up again in full force. It's quite warm and very humid. In fact, it feels like there might be a storm moving in. So excuse the shiny face and everything as well. I thought I'd put together a very quick video just off the cuff discussing something that I've been meaning to do for some time, but I've kind of been dithering about a number of different approaches to it. And it involves the folding weapons, long weapon platform that I built quite some time ago. This is something that you can check out on some of my other videos. I've done several different variations and used this in a number of different projects. But essentially what it is a pultruded fiberglass batten with what you might call longettes or languettes, affixed to titanium sandwich, sort of sandwich cross-section titanium fittings on the ends, and of course a folding bit in the middle, in order to make quite a robust folding long weapons platform. And it's got a locking mechanism in place. It's fairly kind of simple leaf spring style locking mechanism, and when it folds open it locks into place, and it's very sturdy, very strong, not going to come apart. It can actually bear my body weight doing pull-ups if I really want to do something like that. So yeah, pretty robust, which is the one kind of criticism I have of most folding weapon attempts, is that typically they're essentially nothing more than toys. This is certainly not. And you'll notice that at the end, the business end, there are two kind of prongs, and you can attach whatever weapon you'd like on the end of it. I typically have like a spear point tip, but this has been designed to be used with different blades and tips that you might find associated with the polearm weapon. Incidentally, the back end also has a pair of flat prongs that you can attach a spike on the back with, and which is, of course, is typical for some traditional Chinese weapons, like the Quan Dao, for instance, the large bladed Quan Dao. And so these are the type of weapons that I intended to build blades for and put onto the end of it. Now, for some time I've been kind of toing and froing about how to construct those blades. I was at one stage very seriously thinking about making them a sandwich construction composite with layers of fiberglass and a hardened steel core. I think I've kind of moved away from that idea now, and what I want to do is to build the blades out of essentially a single piece of sheet steel, probably a hardox, so high hardness, pre-tempered, pre-hardened hardox plate, but quite thin, so relatively thin. And I was thinking of like a 3mm thick sheet with an edge, so very much like a kind of like a machete blade. And now what I had lying around the school, at least not lying around the school, but in a weapons rack at the school, is an old machete that I actually carried with on one of my adventures in South Africa when I was there, actually in Namibia. A friend and some family of mine, my cousin, we decided to travel up to the northern border of Namibia. And this was quite some time ago. We were all quite young, and there are a lot of dangers associated with these remote areas in Africa, especially where we were in Namibia. We were very close to the northern border of Angola, or the northern border of Namibia, which is bordering Angola. And there's also a lot of wild animals in the area, including lions. And so one of the problems that we were facing was, what do we do if we run out of petrol in the middle of nowhere, and then we have to get back to the nearest town to get some petrol? So we got some jerry cans, and we got a bicycle, and we had a machete, this one in fact. And the plan was that if we ever broke down, I would take the machete and the bicycle, and I would pedal my way to the nearest town and come back with a jerry can full of petrol to save us, which was a really silly idea. But anyway, you know, when you're young, you kind of have these notions. So anyway, that's where this comes from. So it has a lot of sentimental value for me. So what I did was I took off the old wooden handle scales and replaced it with a thin scales made out of glass fiberglass, G10 fiberglass. And I also put some guards, a simple set of cross guards on the side of it. And then I decided that I would test this kind of blade on the folding titanium weapons platform to see how it would function without any kind of additional support. So this is actually only 2 millimeters thick. So this is 2 millimeter thick hardened steel. Probably not the best hardened and tempered steel either, because this was a really cheap machete when we bought it. In fact, when we bought it, it had more of a square tip, and I added in this profile, which was quite because I intended to potentially use it for defense, so I needed a stabbing edge to it potentially. And it was quite fortuitous, because actually this is typical of the shape of a blade for one of the Chinese traditional weapons known as the pudao, or horse cutting sword. It's a very similar blade. Traditionally, the blade would have obviously been quite a bit thicker than this, but I had this, and so I adapted it and I stuck it on to the folding titanium weapons platform, and I thought I'd run just some very simple cutting tests with it to see what the pros and cons were. And since it's Halloween season, and my little boy, my son, is very excited about Halloween. He loves the concept of Halloween. I thought I would do this as kind of like a Halloween special. So I decided to do a couple of cutting tests against a pumpkin. And so this is what those tests looked like. So as you can see from the tests, the first cutting test that I did, I actually got the edge alignment of this blade wrong. I shouldn't say wrong. It was very slightly off by like a few degrees, and that's one of the cons of having a very thin blade, is that if you get the edge alignment even slightly wrong, the weapon is not very forgiving. So it will just flex, because it is so flexible. The blade will just flex and deflect through that target instead of cutting cleanly. However, on the second go, I got the edge alignment perfect, and it cut through like the proverbial hot knife through butter. And that's one of the advantages of having such a thin blade, is that there's a much reduced friction as it moves through an object that you're cutting, provided of course that it can cut through said object. No amount of friction reduction is going to enable this to cut through a solid mild steel beam or rock, despite what Hollywood and some fictional literary works might have you believe about the magical cutting potential of swords and other blades. So I thought that I would put both of those cuts in, even though the first one wasn't particularly good, just to show the pros and cons of this kind of approach. And so, because this is 2 millimeters thick, as I said, it's really quite flexible. It's a typical kind of machete blade. And what I'm going to do when I finally start work on the larger Kwandao and Pudao blades, because I'm going to build two blades for the platform, the titanium folding weapons platform, is that I will use a slightly thicker steel. As I said, probably 3 millimeters thick hardox, and that should reduce that flexing considerably, but still retain a lot of the advantages of having a much thinner blade than what is conventionally used in this kind of weapon. Of course, one of the other major advantages is that weight is reduced considerably for a blade of this kind of thickness, and even potentially for the 3 millimeter thick blade, which makes it very fast and potentially very nimble. So I'm excited to see what how that works. So as soon as I've got the budget for it, I'll start looking around to see if I can get hold of some 3 millimeter thick hardox in a high hardness variety of hardox steel, and go from there. And that should be quite interesting. So watch this space. But as far as this was concerned, it actually worked quite well. I was impressed with his performance. Off camera, I did quite a few chopping tests against hardwood, so dead tree stumps and things like that, and it stood up phenomenally well. No issues, no problems. But again, there was the inherent problem that if I got the edge alignment even slightly wrong, that the blade would flex and deflect or absorb a lot of the impact of the strike. So that is something that does need to be considered for this kind of approach. Anyway, I thought it's an interesting short little video, and really just as a fun little intro to perhaps some future projects. I hope you all have a very happy and safe Halloween, and I will see you all next time.